The denobulans laughed as the tiny army approached, an assortment of alien races in ragged ships. What could be so funny about such desperation and imminent death? Then the denobulans saw the humans. The battle started as so many others in the bloody Denobulan Alliance War. The proud Denobulan Empire sent forth its mighty armada, warship after warship emerging from hyperspace to surround the pathetic rebel fleet. The alien ships scattered like ants, no match for the powerful Denobulan disruptors and plasma torpedoes that lit up space. Explosions blossomed as ship after ship was shredded into glowing scrap. Admiral Gruss watched the slaughter from the command bridge of his flagship, the DS Vindicator. He smiled as the few survivors limped away into the void. Another glorious victory for the Empire, another system that would soon feel the Denobulan boot upon its neck. Then a new contact dropped out of lightspeed, a small battered human frigate, the ISS Defiant. It plunged straight toward the Denobulan armada. Suicidal madness. Admiral Gruss activated the comm and hailed the human vessel. "This is Admiral Gruss of the Denobulan Empire. Your ships are destroyed. Your fleet is in ruins. Surrender now and your lives may be spared." The response came immediately, aggressive, defiant, human. "This is Captain Sean Grant of the ISS Defiant. Go fuck yourself." Gruss clenched his jaw. The arrogance. "You dare defy me? Defy the might of the Denobulan Empire? We will reduce your primitive ship to molten slag." All Denobulan cannons targeted the Defiant. A massive salvo of disruptor beams and plasma blasts lanced out, and missed completely as the human ship jinked and rolled with incredible speed. Impossibly, the frigate's own weapons arrays lit up. Powerful beams of coherent light sliced into the forward Denobulan warships. Their shields flared, buckled, and then the beams punched through into vital systems. A cruiser exploded, a battleship listed, leaking atmosphere. A carrier's hangar bays decompressed. Gruss gripped the arms of his command chair so hard the durasteel creaked. This could not be happening. Not to the glorious Denobulan Starfleet, not by the hand of one pathetic human ship. But the impossible had become deadly reality. The Defiant wove a chaotic path through the Denobulan formation, turbo lasers and particle beams flaring non-stop, crippling and destroying ships 100 times its size. Point defense lasers swatted Denobulan fighters from the void like gnats. The Denobulans scored some hits, scorched some armor, but the small frigate shrugged off damage that would have annihilated any other vessel. Gruss pounded his console. "Destroy that human abomination! I want it out of my sky!" But the Defiant would not die. It seemed to anticipate every attack, sideslip every salvo. The human crew flew like devils and fought like fanatics, no concern for their own lives, only the destruction of their enemy. Frigates, cruisers, destroyers, the Denobulan ships fell one after another. Trailing debris and atmosphere, holed by the Defiant's unerring gunnery, they drifted and spun. Half the Denobulan fleet lost. One of the most powerful war machines in the galaxy, humbled by one small ship crewed by humans. Admiral Gruss felt a cold rage seep through his body, colder than the void between the stars. He would destroy that ship, grind humanity beneath his heel once and for all. The galaxy would be his, and his alone. The Defiant wheeled to face the DS Vindicator, the battered, scorched, triumphant human frigate against the mightiest vessel in the Denobulan armada. Captain Grant's voice crackled over the comm, strong and defiant in the face of overwhelming odds. "Admiral Gruss, let's finish this." Sean's hands flew across the Defiant's controls as he veered the ship hard to port. The Denobulan flagship followed, disruptor cannons flashing. Asteroids tumbled and shattered around them, the debris pinging off their shields. "Keep us tight in the rocks," Sean barked to his helmsman. "Use them for cover." The Defiant slalomed through the dense field, its compact frame and powerful thrusters, letting it slip through gaps the bulky Denobulan ship couldn't follow. But Gruss was relentless, blasting apart any asteroids in his path, determined to bury the human frigate under a hail of rubble. Consoles sparked and klaxons blared as the Defiant took a glancing hit. Sean gritted his teeth. "Reroute auxiliary power to aft shields." The Defiant juked and jinked, Sean using every scrap of skill to keep the ship intact. But Gruss was good, matching him move for move. Disruptor beams gouged into the Defiant's armor. Bulkheads shuddered. Crewmen were thrown from their stations. "Captain, shield strength down to 40%, an officer shouted over the chaos. "We can't take much more of this." Sean's eyes gleamed. Time for a gamble. "Kill the engines." "Sir?" The Defiant's sublight drive sputtered out. The ship drifted, seemingly helpless. On the Denobulan bridge, Gruss let out a triumphant roar. "Target all weapons! Finish them!" The Vindicator surged forward, eager to deliver the final blow. But as it closed in, the Defiant's engines flared back to life. The human ship spun on its axis to face the approaching juggernaut. Sean slammed his fist on a large red button. Activate the phase shift drive. A shimmering field enveloped the Defiant. It shot forward, and passed right through a massive asteroid that had drifted between the two ships. The Denobulan crew gaped in shock as the human frigate emerged from solid rock behind them, quantum torpedoes already launching from its tubes. On the Defiant's sparking bridge, the crew let out ragged cheers. Sean allowed himself a tight smile. They had hurt the Denobulans badly. Gruss would think twice before... "Set a course for Arcadia," he ordered. "Full combat speed. If the Denobulans want to fight, we'll give them a war." Sean's hands tightened on the Defiant's controls as the distress call from Arcadia colony echoed through the bridge. Gruss's flagship limped away, trailing debris and smoke, a tempting target. But Sean knew where his duty lay. "Helm, set a course for Arcadia," he ordered. "Maximum speed." The Defiant's engines roared as it leapt into warp, racing toward the besieged colony. They dropped out of light speed into a maelstrom of weapons fire. A Denobulan invasion force, dozens of ships strong, hammered at the colony's faltering shields. And in the vanguard, a cruiser Sean recognized all too well. The DS Imperator, commanded by Gruss's second, Commander Zaxxon. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," Olivia said from the tactical station. "The colony won't hold long against a force that size." Sean's jaw clenched. "Then we even the odds. Prep all Marines for ground combat. I'm leading the counterattack myself." Minutes later, Sean materialized on the surface with a dozen of the Defiant's best, pulse rifles primed and ready. The colony's defenders were putting up a fierce fight, but the Denobulan shock troopers were relentless, pushing them back street by blood-soaked street. "With me," Sean barked, storming forward. "For Earth and the Alliance." They hit the Denobulans like a human thunderbolt. Pulse round stitched aliens, flechette shells shredded armor. The Marines were outnumbered 10-1, but they were the elite, and they made the enemy pay for every inch in blood. In orbit, the Defiant danced and twirled, Olivia using every ounce of skill to keep the frigate intact. "Bring the phase shift drive online," she commanded. "We hit them hard and fade away before they can counter." Again and again the Defiant flashed into being amidst the Denobulan formation, lancing ships with lasers and torpedoes before vanishing from sensors, leaving only chaos in its wake. On the ground, Sean and his Marines battled through to the colony's power plant, the heart of its defenses. They took cover behind shattered walls and wrecked vehicles, trading fire with the Denobulan horde. But for each foe they felled, 3 more seemed to take their place. Sean's eyes flicked to the reactor core, a desperate plan forming. "All units fall back to the perimeter. I'm going to blow the core." "That's an order." He hefted his rifle. "Now go, I'll hold them." As his soldiers reluctantly retreated, Sean charged into the heart of the reactor, Denobulan troops hot on his heels. Consoles sparked, and emergency lights flashed red as he skidded to a halt at the main control panel and hammered in the overload sequence. Zaxxon's voice boomed over the PA. "A valiant effort, Captain, but futile. Now you die." "You first," Sean snarled and slammed his fist on the activation button. A sun bloomed in the heart of the colony. The power plant vanished in an incandescent fireball, vaporizing the Denobulan forces inside and sending a devastating shockwave ripping through their ranks outside. In orbit, The denobulan ships reeled as the blast washed over them, shields failing, hulls buckling. In the sudden, stunned silence that followed, a single sound cut through the smoke and ruin, the sound of human cheers. Sean staggered out of the rubble, uniform torn and scorched, face streaked with sweat and grime. His marines surged forward to meet him, pounding his back and shouting his name. The colonists emerged from their shattered homes, faces alight with hope rekindled. They pressed close around the captain, reaching out to touch their savior. "The colony is safe," Sean rasped into his comm, "but the war goes on, and we're going to take the fight to the denobulans, no matter the cost." The celebrations of the human victory over the denobulan empire quickly spread across the galaxy. Oppressed races saw a glimmer of hope in humanity's tenacity and courage. Whispers of rebellion echoed from star system to star system. The once unassailable hold of the denobulans began to crack. Admiral Gruss paced the bridge of his damaged flagship, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. Defeat tasted like ashes in his mouth. The bridge crew averted their eyes, afraid to draw his wrath. He strode to the comm station. "Get me a secure channel to the Volari now." The view screen flickered and a cloaked figure appeared, its face concealed in shadows. "Admiral Gruss, your failures are becoming concerning." The Volari's voice was cold and metallic. Gruss bristled. "I require your assistance, a weapon to crush the humans and their pathetic rebellion." "And why should we aid you further?" There was a long, considering pause. Then, "Very well, but do not fail us again, Admiral." The transmission cut out. Gruss allowed himself a tight smile. Soon the humans would learn the price of defiance. Days later, intercepted denobulan transmissions reached the Defiant. Supply depot coordinates deep in denobulan space. Minimal defenses. A tempting target. Sean leaned over the star map, his brow furrowed. "This could turn the tide. We cut off their supply lines, starve them out." Olivia frowned. "It seems too good to be true." "We have to take the chance, plot a course." The Defiant dropped out of warp at the depot coordinates, weapons hot, shields raised. But instead of a lightly guarded installation, they found themselves facing a wall of denobulan steel. Warships stretched as far as sensors could see, a deadly trap snapped shut. But it was too late. The denobulan ships unleashed a barrage of pulsing, writhing energy, unlike anything the humans had seen before. It slammed into the Defiant, passing through shields like they weren't even there. Crew members screamed and convulsed, collapsing to the deck. Sean felt a searing pain in his skull, an alien presence invading his mind. He fought it, tooth and nail, but it was too strong. His vision dimmed, and he slumped over the helm, the ship forgotten. Admiral Gruss's face appeared on the view screen, twisted into a cruel sneer. "Did you really think you could defy the denobulan empire and survive? Thanks to our Volari allies, your feeble minds are now enslaved to our will." Gruss strode onto the Defiant's bridge, flanked by denobulan soldiers. He looked down at Sean's unconscious form and laughed. "The great Captain Sean Grant helpless at my feet. Earth will share your fate. Your people will be our slaves, your resources ours to plunder. The rebellion dies with you." Sean and his crew were dragged away in chains, the fight drained from their bodies. But deep in Sean's mind, buried beneath the layers of psychic enslavement, a spark of defiance still burned. Aboard Gruss' flagship, a nightmare of twisting denobulan architecture, the human prisoners were thrown into cells, their minds fogged and slow. Sean shook his head, fighting to clear the cobwebs. They had to escape, to warn Earth, to stop the denobulan Volari plan. But how? He looked to his crew, saw the same desperate determination in their eyes. They would find a way, they had to. The fate of humanity, of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. In the bowels of Gruss's ship, Sean tensed his cybernetic arm. Hidden servos whirred and a lockpick snicked out from a concealed compartment. He contorted, working the pick into his restraints. Metal scraped, tumblers clicked, the cuffs snapped open. "I knew that augment would come in handy," he grunted, freeing his crew. "Prescott, take Finn and Shu, secure us a path to the hangar. I'll handle the mind control device. Prescott nodded sharply. Aye, Captain, give 'em hell. The team split, racing through twisting denobulan corridors. Sean's enhanced muscles propelled him forward, his crew close behind. A door hissed open ahead. Volari guards spilled out, energy staffs crackling. Sean never broke stride. He launched into a spinning kick, taekwondo mixed with Krav Maga. Bone crunched, a guard crumpled. Sean rode the momentum, cybernetic arm lashing out in a Muay Thai elbow smash. More Volari surged forward. Sean's crew hit them in a human hurricane. Haley whirled capoeira and silat flowing. Jax hammered precise kung fu strikes. Volari fell like leaves in a storm. In the hangar, Prescott and her team skidded to a halt. Rows of denobulan troops leveled plasma rifles. "Cover!" Prescott shouted. Finn and Shu dove aside as bolts scorched the air. Prescott lunged for a control console, fingers flying. The deck lurched, gravity reversed, denobulans tumbled, weapons clattering. "Move," Prescott urged. "That won't hold them long." Sean burst into the chamber housing the mind control device. Gruss stood before it, Volari energy blade blazing. "You're too late, human," Gruss snarled. "The galaxy will be ours." They clashed like titans, blades flashing, sparks spraying. Sean dodged and parried, his speed matched by Gruss's raw power. The denobulan rained down hammering blows. Sean countered with precise strikes. Gruss pressed the attack, driving Sean back. The energy blade slipped through Sean's guard. Pain seared his side. Sean stumbled. Gruss loomed over him, blade raised for the killing stroke. With a defiant roar, Sean lunged from his knees. His cybernetic fist slammed into the energy blade. It shattered like glass. Sean's other hand whipped up. An implanted plasma weapon flared. The bolt took Gruss square in the chest. He flew back, crashing into the mind control device. It erupted in a geyser of sparks and flame. Sean staggered upright, clutching his wound. "That was for Earth, you son of a bitch." He sprinted for the hangar, alarms wailing, ship shuddering. He burst through the doors. Prescott had a shuttle prepped, engines roaring. Finn and Shu crouched at the ramp, rifles barking, holding back the denobulan tide. "Let's go," Sean shouted over the chaos. "Get us out of here," Sean ordered as he raced for the bridge. "Full burn!" Stars stretched to lines as the Defiant leapt to warp. In their wake, Gruss's flagship drifted, battered and burning. The mind control device was scrap. Gruss was a broken ruin, but the war wasn't over. Far from it. On the bridge, Sean sank into the command chair, adrenaline fading, exhaustion and pain catching up. His crew looked to him, battered but defiant. "We hurt them today," Sean said, voice rough with fatigue. "Showed them we won't go quietly, but this is just the beginning. The denobulans, the Volari, they won't stop, not until we stop them. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to fight, for Earth, for the Alliance. For every species, every world that stands against tyranny, we'll fight and we'll win, no matter the cost." As the Defiant sped through the stars, its crew united, its mission clear, Sean knew the greatest challenges were still to come. But with his crew, his ship, and the indomitable power of the human spirit, he would meet those challenges head-on. The denobulan flagship hung shattered in space, a twisted wreck lit by stuttering ember glow. On its broken bridge, a fire-limbed figure stirred in the rubble. Admiral Gruss pushed himself up on charred hands, synthetic fluids leaking from his mangled cybernetic limbs. The mind control device lay in ruins behind him. His ambitions crumbled to ash. But as he stared out through the fractured viewports at the retreating flare of the Defiant's engines, something kindled in Gruss's organic eye. Not despair, not even anger. Hate, cold and pure. Gruss's metal-laced fingers curled into fists. "This isn't over, human," he rasped, voice buzzing with feedback from his damaged vocoder. "Not while I still draw breath. Not while the denobulan empire still stands. I will see your worlds burn. I will see your species enslaved. This I swear, on the graves of my ancestors." The true war was about to begin. Sean burst onto the Defiance bridge, cybernetic arms sparking, face streaked with blood and grime. The crew looked up, haggard, but resolute. "Sit, Rep!" Sean barked, striding to the command chair. "The Volari fleet is in retreat," Prescott reported from Tactical. "Their flagship is crippled, but—" She hesitated. "Out with it, Liv." "Intelligence reports the Volari amassing an invasion force. Target, Earth." Sean's organic fist clenched. "Like hell they will." He spun to the nav console. "Jax, plot a course for the Volari homeworld. We're taking this fight to them." The Defiant streaked through warp space, a silver dagger aimed at the heart of the Volari Empire. Allied ships fell in formation, a ragtag armada of rebels and renegades. They dropped from warp on the edge of the Volari system. A planet loomed before them, shrouded in acrid smog. Vast factory complexes scarred its surface. The Volari's war machine laid bare. "All ships attack formation," Sean ordered over the comm. "Fighters punch a hole through their defenses. Capital ships target those factories. Let's bring their war to a screeching halt." The Allied fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Volari ships rose to meet them, disruptor cannons spitting green fire, the void lit up with deadly energy. The Defiant dove into the thick of the fight, Sean guiding it through a storm of flak and fury. Its phasers lashed out, scattering Volari fighters like leaves. But the enemy kept coming, and at their head a monstrous warship, all spikes and spines and pulsing with malevolent energy. Unknown configuration, power readings off the scale. It's like nothing we've seen before. Sean bared his teeth. "Then let's give it a proper human welcome." The Defiant veered to face the behemoth. Sean's finger stabbed down on the trigger. Torpedoes belched from the tubes, blazing toward the Volari ship. Its shields flared, absorbing the blasts. Then, with a flicker of pseudo-motion, it vanished. "Where did it go?" Sean snapped. "It's everywhere," Finn called out, reading multiple signatures. The Volari ship was in a dozen places at once, after images shimmering like a hall of mirrors. Its weapons struck out from impossible angles, tearing into the Allied fleet. Consoles burst in showers of sparks. Bulkheads groaned. The Defiant shuddered under the onslaught. "Shields down to 20%, Prescott shouted over the chaos. "We can't take another hit like that." Sean's mind raced. The Volari ship was using some kind of phase technology, blinking in and out of real space. He couldn't track it, couldn't target it. "Jax, can you rig the phase shift drive to emit a pulse?" The Saurian engineer blinked. "A pulse? Yes, but—" "Do it. We're going to overload their shift drive, force them back into real space." Sean spun back to the view screen, watching the ghost ship flicker and dance. His cybernetic eye whirred, tracking, analyzing. There, a pattern in the chaos, a rhythm to the jumps. A wave of shimmering force burst from the Defiant, rippling across space. It struck the Volari ship in mid-flicker. The behemoth convulsed, wreathed in arcing energy. Then, with a flash, it snapped back into real space, engines guttering. "Fire, fire, fire!" Sean roared. The Allied fleet pounced like wolves on a wounded bear. Weapons hammered into the stricken warship, tearing through its faltering shields, ripping into hull and hold. The Volari ship heaved, belching gouts of flame. Then, with a silent scream of ruptured metal, it broke apart, torn to shreds by the blistering barrage. A ragged cheer went up across the fleet comm, but Sean held up a hand for silence. It wasn't over yet. On the planet below, the factory complexes still churned with activity. Rivers of molten metal poured from smelters. Assembly lines rattled and clanked. The Volari's war effort ground on, heedless of the battle above. "All fighters, form up on me," came Prescott's voice over the comm. "We're going in. Time to give the Volari a taste of their own medicine." A swarm of Alliance strike craft peeled away from the main battle, Prescott's angular interceptor in the lead. They dove into the planet's atmosphere, plunging through the smog and haze. Volari ground batteries erupted in a frenzy of flak and tracer fire. Energy beams sizzled past the strike team's canopies, close enough to scorch paint. But Prescott flew like she'd been born in the cockpit, corkscrewing and juking, leading her pilots through a deadly aerial ballet. They skimmed over factory roofs and reactor domes, missiles and bombs plummeting from their racks, turning the Volari facilities into storms of fire and debris. A fierce, savage joy surged through Sean as he watched the destruction unfold. This was the beating heart of the Volari war effort, and they were ripping it out. But then a new alarm blared across the bridge. "Prescott's hit," Finn reported, voice tight. "She's going down." On the screen, Prescott's interceptor tumbled from the formation, trailing smoke and flame. It plunged toward the surface, vanishing into the hellish industrial landscape. Haley shot him a look. "Captain, we're still heavily engaged up here. We need you in command." Sean met her gaze, his own hard as steel. "Prescott would do the same for any of us. We don't leave our people behind." He turned to the helm. "Jax, you have the con. Keep the Volari off balance. I'll be back with Liv." Minutes later, a shuttle was screaming through the acrid atmosphere, Sean at the controls, a hand-picked squad of Marines at his back. They sat down in a whirlwind of choking dust, the twisted wreckage of Prescott's fighter, lying in a crumpled heap 100 meters away. Sean was out the hatch before the engines had spooled down, sprinting across the broken ground, Marines fanning out around him. The downed interceptor was a mess of torn metal and ruptured lines, but the cockpit was intact, and there, slumped over the controls— "Liv?" Sean reached her side, praying to whatever guards might be listening. "Let her be alive, please, let her be alive." Relief crashed through Sean like a wave. He reached out, starting to unbuckle her restraints. Then the world erupted in fire and noise. Volari forces burst from the surrounding buildings, pouring from every door and window. Disruptor blasts stitched the ground, chewing up earth and stone. Sean's Marines responded instantly, laying down a blistering hail of return fire. But there were so many, too many. They were being overrun. Sean hauled Prescott from the cockpit, shielding her with his own body as they stumbled for cover behind a shattered wall. He shoved a rifle into her hands, then took up position at her side, cybernetic arm reconfiguring into a plasma cannon. They fought like demons, like heroes of old, holding the line against a tide of chrome and malice. Volari fell by the dozens, by the score, but still they came on, heedless of loss, driven by a single imperative: destroy the humans. Sean's arm blazed with the heat of continuous fire, servos whining in protest. Warning lights flashed across his optics, ammo low, power cells depleted. But he gritted his teeth and fought on. They had to hold, they had to. Then a new sound split the air, a deep rumbling boom like the beating of some monstrous war drum. Gruss strode through the smoke and flames, a hulking figure of metal and menace. His body had been remade, twisted by Volari science into a thing of jagged edges and cruel blades. But his eyes, his organic eye, still burned with that same icy malice, that same implacable will. He leveled an arm, fist unfurling into a crackling disruptor cannon. "Did you think you could defy me, Sean?" Gruss asked, voice booming and hollow. "Defy the inevitable?" Sean pushed himself to his feet, moving to put himself between Gruss and Prescott. "I've defied you this long, you son of a bitch," he snarled. "I'll keep on defying you to the last breath." Gruss laughed, cold and terrible. "Then breathe deep, human, and know that your species dies with you." And he opened fire. Gruss opened fire, a blistering barrage of disruptor bolts that raked the ground around Sean. The human captain dove for cover, his team scattering and returning fire. Disruptor beams and plasma bolts crisscrossed the battlefield, superheating the air and turning stone to slag. Sean rolled to his feet, cybernetic arm reconfiguring into a plasma cannon. He squeezed off shot after shot, blasting Volari troopers into smoldering heaps. But for every enemy he felled, two more seemed to take their place, an endless tide of chrome and malice. And at the center of it all, Gruss. The Denobulan commander strode through the chaos, his Volari exoskeleton shrugging off weapons fire like rain. He was a juggernaut of metal and hate, unstoppable, implacable. "So you will die here, human," Gruss boomed, his voice distorted by the exosuit speakers. "You and your pathetic species." Sean gritted his teeth and charged, jets in his cybernetic legs propelling him forward. He crashed into Gruss with the force of a meteor, sending them both tumbling across the rocky ground. They grappled and struck, servos straining, metal screeching against metal. Gruss was strong, terribly strong, his exoskeleton granting him power beyond human ken. His blows shattered stone, cratered the earth. But Sean fought with the strength of desperation, the ferocity of a man with everything to lose. He battered at Gruss's armor, seeking a weakness, a chink in the Volari steel. His cybernetic arm reconfigured, morphed, each blow delivered with pile-driver force. Yet it wasn't enough. Gruss was too powerful, too relentless. Sean felt himself weakening, his body battered and bleeding, his vision blurred, his breath came in ragged gasps. Gruss loomed over him, eyes blazing with triumph. "Pathetic," the Denobulan sneered. "Is this the best humanity has to offer?" He raised a fist, primed to deliver the killing blow. Sean's mind raced, desperate, searching for a solution, and then, buried deep in his cybernetic code, he found it. A hidden subroutine, a last-ditch failsafe. He triggered it with a thought. Pain lanced through him, whited out his vision. His cybernetic arm vibrated, reconfigured, a high-pitched whine filling the air. Power surged through his circuits, bleeding-edge human tech pushed to the limit and beyond. Sean's next punch hit with the force of a nuclear bomb. It shattered Gruss' exoskeleton like glass, sent the Denobulan hurtling back in a spray of sparks and shrapnel. Gruss crashed to the ground, his armor smoking and sparking, his body broken. But Sean had no time to savor his victory. All around him, his team was fighting for their lives against the Volari onslaught. They were being overrun, beaten back. It was only a matter of time. Then a shout cut through the din of battle. Prescott, battered but unbowed, emerged from the fray. A captured Volari energy staff crackling in her hands. She fought her way to Sean's side, the staff a blur of motion, each strike precise and devastating. "We can't hold them," she shouted over the chaos. "We need to pull back." Sean nodded, his tactical mind racing. They had to find a way off this rock, signal the Defiant, but how? His eyes fell on Prescott's downed fighter, a plan forming. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. "Fall back to the fighter," he ordered over the team comm. "We're getting off this hellhole." They fought their way to the wrecked ship, a running battle every step of the way. Volari forces dogged their heels, disruptor fire scorching the air around them. At the fighter, Sean's heart sank. The ship was a ruin, its comm array a tangled mess of fused wires and shattered circuits. There would be no calling for help, no extraction. But Sean refused to give up. He ripped open an access panel, started yanking out power cells. "Prescott, rig these into a beacon," he ordered, tossing her the glowing cylinders. "Highest power output you can manage." Prescott nodded, her hands already flying over the impromptu components. Around them the team formed a perimeter, pulse rifles barking, holding back the encroaching horde. Minutes felt like hours, each second bought with blood and sweat. But finally the beacon was ready. Sean slammed the activation switch. A pillar of light erupted from the jury-rigged device, a blazing lance that pierced the smoke-choked sky. It was a signal flare, a desperate cry for help, and a challenge to every Volari in orbit. "That'll get their attention," Sean growled. "Now we just need to hold out until—" A disruptor beam slammed into the beacon, exploding it into a million fragments. Volari dropships screamed from the sky, disgorging dozens, hundreds of chrome-clad warriors. The horde surged forward, a tidal wave of metal and malice. Sean and his team met them head-on, rifles flaring, fists and feet flying. They fought with the courage of lions, the ferocity of cornered wolves. But it was a losing battle, and they all knew it. They were outnumbered, outgunned. This was a fight they could not win. Yet they fought on, defiant to the last. They would sell their lives dearly, make the Volari bleed for every inch. If this was to be their end, they would make it an end worthy of human warriors. Sean's cybernetic arm blazed with heat, its power cells drained, its circuits blown. His organic body was battered and bleeding, pushed beyond all limits of endurance. But still he fought, still he raged against the dying of the light. "Come on, you bastards," he roared, his voice hoarse and raw. "Come and get us." The Volari came, wave after wave, an endless tide of chrome and death. Sean and his team met them, again and again, in a clash of steel and will. The ground shook with the thunder of battle. The air burned with the heat of 1,000 suns, and amidst the chaos and the carnage, the humans fought on, the last defiant sparks of a dying race. He shook his head, banished the thought. No, he would not yield, not now, not ever. He would fight and he would win. For Earth, for the Alliance, for the future. Sean raised his fist, the battered metal gleaming in the hellish light. "For humanity," he bellowed, his voice rising above the din. "Defiant to the end." And he charged once more into the fray, his team at his back, to meet the chrome tide and the fate that awaited them. The Volari surged forward, a chrome tide sweeping across the battlefield. Disruptor bolts filled the air, sizzling past Sean's head, stitching the ground around his feet. He ducked and wove, his cybernetic arm a blur as it reconfigured from plasma cannon to kinetic shield and back again. His team fought like demons at his side, pulse rifles flaring, grenades arcing into the Volari ranks. They moved as one, a well-oiled machine forged in the fires of 100 battles, but for all their skill, all their courage, the odds were simply too great. A disruptor bolt caught Finn in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the ground. Zhu took a glancing blow to the helmet, her faceplate shattering in a spray of plasglass. Jax roared in pain as a Volari blade sliced into his side, his green blood splattering the rocky ground. Sean gritted his teeth and fought on, his arm a whirling dervish of metal and plasma. He could feel the servos straining, the power cells depleting with each shot, each block. It was only a matter of time before a disruptor bolt, a searing lance of energy, punched through his cybernetic shoulder. Circuits fried, servos seized. The arm went dead, hanging limp and useless at his side. Sean staggered, his vision swimming, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked up, saw the Volari closing in, their chrome faces impassive, their weapons leveled. This was it then, the end. After all the battles, all the sacrifices, this was where he would make his final stand, on a nameless rock, light years from home, facing an implacable foe. But he would not go quietly. He would not give them the satisfaction. With a roar of defiance, Sean charged, his one remaining arm swinging, his legs pumping. He barreled into the Volari line, a human battering ram, and sent chrome bodies flying. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he might break through, might carve a path to safety for his team, his friends. But then the Volari recovered, pressed in from all sides. Disruptor bolts scorched his armor, seared his flesh. Blades and fists battered at him, seeking to beat him down, to grind him to dust. Sean fought like a man possessed, all skill and technique forgotten, operating on pure instinct and adrenaline. His fist shattered chrome faceplates, caved-in metal chests. His feet lashed out in spinning kicks, snapped necks and spines. He was a whirlwind of desperate, savage fury. But it couldn't last. No human, no matter how augmented or determined, could stand alone against such numbers. Blow by blow, inch by inch, they wore him down. His movements slowed, his strikes weakened. Blood streamed into his eyes, blurring his vision. Dimly, through the haze of pain and encroaching darkness, he heard the sounds of battle still raging, his team fighting on to the bitter end. He tried to rise, to join them, but his body wouldn't obey. He could only lie there, broken and bleeding, as the darkness closed in. "On your feet, soldier," Prescott's voice, raw and strained, but alive. "We're not done yet." She stood over him, battered and bloodied, her armor scorched and rent. But her eyes blazed with an unquenchable fire, a fierce, defiant resolve. In her hands, she cradled a Volari disruptor cannon, its barrel glowing with deadly energy. Behind her, the rest of the team, wounded but unbowed. Finn, his shoulder a mess of burnt flesh and fused metal. Shu, her face a mask of blood beneath her shattered helmet. Jax, one hand pressed to his side, the other clutching a pulse rifle. They formed a line, a human wall, placing themselves between Sean and the Volari horde. For a moment Sean could only stare, his heart swelling with a fierce, desperate pride. This was what it meant to be human, to stand together, to fight together, no matter the odds, to defy the darkness, even unto the bitter end. With a groan of effort, Sean pushed himself to his feet. He swayed, his vision blurring, but he locked his knees, forced himself to stand tall. He reached out, clasped Prescott's shoulder. "Together," he rasped, his voice a broken whisper, "to the end." Prescott nodded, her jaw set. As one, they turned to face the Volari, the disruptor cannon thrumming in her hands, Sean's remaining fist clenched at his side. The Volari surged forward, a chrome tide, ready to sweep them away. Sean and his team met them head-on, weapons flaring, hearts pounding. They fought with the strength of desperation, the courage of those who knew they were already dead, and thus had nothing left to lose. The disruptor cannon roared in Prescott's hands, each shot a searing lance of destruction. Volari warriors fell, their armor melted, their bodies charred. But always, more came to take their place, an endless tide of metal and malice. Sean fought at Prescott's side, his fist and feet lashing out, his body a battered weapon. He could feel his strength waning, his life leaking out with each drop of blood. But he pushed on, driven by a grim determination, a refusal to yield. Around them the team fought with equal ferocity, Finn, his rifle blazing until its power cell ran dry, then wielding it like a club, smashing chrome skulls. Shu, her blades a whirling dervish, carving through Volari armor like butter. Jax, firing shot after shot, his green blood mingling with the oil and fluids of the foes he felled. They fought, and they fell. One by one the team dwindled. Finn, overwhelmed by a surge of chrome bodies, dragged down and torn apart. Shu, her blades shattered, her body broken by a tide of metal fists. Jax, still firing, even as disruptor bolts stitched across his chest, his eyes defiant to the last. And then it was just Sean and Prescott back to back, surrounded by a ring of chrome death. The disruptor cannon clicked empty, its energy spent. Prescott cast it aside, drew her sidearm. The pistol barked, again and again, each shot a defiant scream. Click, click, click. The pistol ran dry. Prescott hurled it at the nearest Volari, then drew her combat knife, the blade seeming tiny and futile against the chrome horde. "It's been an honor," Sean said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Serving with you, fighting with you." Prescott nodded, her grip tightening on his. "The honor was mine, Captain, always." They turned then to face the end. The Volari closed in, their weapons leveled, their visors gleaming with pitiless light. Sean and Prescott charged, a final defiant roar on their lips. They leapt into the chrome tide, fists and feet and blade lashing out, determined to take as many of the enemy with them as they could. For a moment, just a moment, they were a storm, a whirlwind of desperate, savage fury. Volari fell before them, broken and shattered, but it was a fleeting triumph, a momentary stay against the inevitable. The chrome tide surged forward, engulfed them. Disruptor bolts and metal fists rained down, shattering bone, searing flesh. Sean felt Prescott's hand torn from his, saw her vanish beneath a wave of chrome bodies. He fought to reach her, his fist and feet lashing out with the strength of desperation. But there were too many, the tide too strong. He was driven back, battered down, his body broken, his strength spent. As he fell, as the darkness rushed in to claim him, Sean's last thought was of Prescott, of his team, of all they had fought for, all they had lost. It was a good death, he thought, a fitting end, for a soldier, for a human. And with that thought, that final defiant flicker of pride, Sean Grant, captain of the ISS Defiant, closed his eyes and embraced the dark. As the Volari forces closed in, disruptor bolts sizzling the air, Sean and his battered team fought with the desperate ferocity of the doomed. Pulse rifles barked defiance, combat knives flashed in the churning melee. But for each chrome foe they felled, a dozen more surged forward, a relentless tide of metal and malice. Prescott fell back, firing shot after shot into the mass. Her pistol clicked empty. She hurled it at a Volari trooper, denting its faceplate, then drew her blade with a snarl. Sean unleashed a roar, smashing his fist into a Volari chest, crumpling the armor like foil. But pain lanced through him, his wounds bleeding, his strength fading. He staggered, going to one knee. The Volari loomed over them, weapons leveled for the killing blast. Sean looked to Prescott, reaching out to clasp her hand one final time. A thunderous roar split the sky. The Defiant burst through the clouds, hull plates blazing with the friction of atmospheric entry. Its cannons swiveled and spat streams of incandescent destruction. The Volari barrage hammered into the ranks of the Volari, scattering chrome bodies like leaves in a gale. Sean and his team, seizing the moment, surged to their feet and sprinted for the descending frigate. The Defiant's ramp slammed down, assault rifles already barking from the marine fire teams crouched within. Sean and the others dove inside. The ramp snapped shut, and the ship leapt for the heavens, even as Volari disruptor beams clawed at its shields. In the cargo bay, Sean slumped against a bulkhead, drawing ragged breaths. Prescott crouched beside him, her face streaked with sweat and grime, a fierce grin on her lips. "Couldn't let you have all the fun," Prescott shot back. On the bridge, Jax and the others were grim but victorious. "The production facility is slag," the Saurian reported. "The Allied fleet is scattering the Volari defense force, but that warship is still out there, and it's coming for us." Sean pushed himself to his feet, Prescott supporting him. "Then let's finish this. Ready for one last dance?" The Defiant streaked into the void to meet its foe. The Volari warship loomed ahead, a behemoth bristling with weapons. It spat a salvo of searing energy. The Defiant juked and jinked, the blast sizzling past. Sean, back in the command chair, hands flying over the controls, wove the frigate through a storm of fire and fury. The Defiant was a hornet, darting and stinging, pitting speed and agility against brute strength. Prescott, at the weapons station, unleashed the Defiant's own stings. Lasers and torpedoes lanced out, chewing into the warship's shields, boiling armor to slag. The Volari ship shuddered but came on, implacable. Sean's jaw clenched. Time to roll the dice. "Prescott, ready the phase shift drive. Full power." "Aye, sir." The Defiant whirled, presenting its flank to the warship. The Volari guns roared, a full broadside of annihilation. At the last second, Sean punched the phase shift. The Defiant vanished. The Volari salvo passed through empty space. The human frigate rematerialized inside the Volari shields, nose to nose with the warship. Prescott stabbed the trigger. A full spread of quantum torpedoes belched from the tubes, ripping into the warship's unprotected hull. The Volari ship convulsed, explosions marching along its length. Sean wrenched the controls, pulling the Defiant away. The phase shift drive whined in protest, taxed beyond limits. Alarms shrieked. Consoles burst in showers of sparks. The lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into darkness. "Report," Sean barked. "Main power offline," Finn shouted back. "Phase shift drive burned out. We're drifting." Sean sagged back in his chair, exhausted to the bone. The Volari warship was dust, the production facility destroyed. A great victory, but at a cost. The Defiant was helpless, crippled, deep in hostile space. He looked around at his crew, wounded and weary, but alive. They had followed him to hell and back, never wavering. His heart swelled with fierce pride. The Defiant spun slowly in the void, a battered silver seed adrift on the stellar wind, waiting for the dawn. The Defiant spun slowly in the void, its power drained, its crew laboring to bring systems back online. In the flickering emergency lights, Sean wiped sweat and grime from his brow. His muscles burned with fatigue, but he pushed on. They had to get the ship operational. Had to... A flicker of movement in the shadows. Sean spun, senses on high alert. There, a glint of metal, a shimmer of air, his eyes widened. Cloaking technology. The Volari were here. He drew his sidearm, the weapon whining as it charged. Around him the shadows seemed to come alive, dark forms detaching from the walls, Volari commandos, heavily armed and armored, their movements fluid and precise. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air. Sean dove for cover, returning fire. His crew, scattered throughout the ship, responded to the threat, the staccato bark of human weapons mixed with the hissing snap of Volari rifles. Sean's mind raced. The Volari had breached their hull. How, when? Questions for later. Now they had to repel these boarders, had to retake their ship. Static crackled, then partial main power restored. Sensors detecting Volari ship portside, some kind of cloaking tech. The link cut out. Sean swore. Prescott was in engineering alone. He had to get to her. He burst from cover, sprinting down the corridor. A Volari commando loomed ahead, rifle raised. Sean fired from the hip, the plasma bolt catching the alien in the faceplate. It crumpled. Sean leaped over the body, never breaking stride. More Volari emerged from the shadows, weapons spitting fire. Sean zigzagged, returning fire, his aim true. Commando after commando fell, smoking holes in their armor. But there were so many. Too many. They knew the ship, knew its layout, were herding the crew, picking them off. He had to outthink them, had to... A plasma bolt seared past his cheek, close enough to blister skin. He spun, dropping to one knee, sidearm leveled. The Volari who had fired was good, too good. It anticipated his move, was already dodging. Sean compensated, but the alien was fast, inhumanly so. A plasma bolt took it in the side of the head. It dropped like a marionette with cut strings. Prescott stepped from the shadows, rifle raised, face set in grim lines. Looked like you could use a hand. Sean stood, nodding his thanks. Ship status? Not good. Main powers fluctuating. Shields, weapons offline, and that stealth ship is still out there. Sean's jaw tightened. They were crippled, vulnerable, but the Volari had made a mistake, sending boarders, had given him a chance. I have a plan. We let them take the bridge. The bridge was a killing field. Consoles sparked and smoked. Bodies littered the deck. At the center of the chaos stood Zin, the Volari commander, flanked by his elite guard. Sean stepped from the turbolift, hands raised, sidearm holstered. I surrender. Zin tilted his head, cold eyes appraising. The great Sean Grant, brought low at last. You got me. Call off your dogs. I'll order my crew to stand down. A pause, then a nod. Zin gestured to his soldiers. They lowered their weapons fractionally. Sean walked forward, steps measured. He stopped an arm's length from Zin. The Volari towered over him, a sleek chrome giant. Your ship is mine now, human. Your crew, my prisoners, you have lost. Sean met that pitiless gaze, smiled. Have I? His cybernetic arm shot out, fingers closing around Zin's throat. He squeezed with all the strength of human desperation and Volari alloy. Zin's eyes bulged. His hands scrabbled at Sean's arm. The Volari guards raised their rifles. They hesitated. Zin gargled, his face turning a mottled blue. Now! Rifles clattered to the deck. Hatches slammed shut. Klaxons blared. On the view screens, Volari boarders clutched at their throats as the air was sucked from the corridors. Sean hauled Zin to the command chair, slammed him down. Order your ship to stand down, surrender. Zin glared pure hate, but nodded jerkily. He keyed the comm with a trembling hand, hissed orders in his native tongue. On the screens, the Volari stealth ship shimmered into view. It hung before them, sleek and menacing. He straightened, strode to the helm. Prescott, emergency thrusters. Sean, we'll tear ourselves apart. The ship lurched. Inertial dampeners screamed. The Defiant leapt forward directly toward the looming stealth ship. Zin's eyes widened. He lunged up from the chair. Sean clotheslined him with a cybernetic arm. The Volari crashed back, stunned. The Defiant hurtled toward the stealth ship. Collision alarms blared. Proximity warnings flashed. At the last second, Sean wrenched the controls. The Defiant corkscrewed. Emergency thrusters firing in sequence. The human ship slipped past the Volari vessel with meters to spare. And the Volari stealth ship, caught off guard, ploughed straight into the expanding cloud of debris and detritus that had spilled from the Defiant's opened airlocks. Jagged metal tore into the sleek hull. Atmosphere vented in explosive decompression. The Defiant spun away, trailing wreckage, its crew clinging to their stations. On the view screens the Volari ship listed, spilling flames, escape pods bursting from its flanks. In the command chair, Zinn slumped, defeated. Sean stood over him, bloodied, triumphant. "Never underestimate humanity. We'll always find a way." He turned to his crew, his family. "Get me a damage report and set a course for the nearest friendly port. We're going to need some serious repairs." The Defiant limped through the stars, battered but unbroken. Its crew exhausted but victorious. They had faced the void and the enemy, and they had endured. They were bloodied, but they were not beaten. The Defiant lurched violently as Sean triggered the emergency thrusters. Zinn staggered, his chrome armor clanging against the bulkhead. Sean seized the moment, lunging forward and slamming his cybernetic fist into the Volari commander's faceplate. The blow cracked the polished metal, sending spiderweb fractures racing across its surface. Zinn reeled back, his movements suddenly clumsy and uncoordinated. Sean pressed his advantage, raining down blows with all the strength of his human fury and Volari-forged alloys. Sparks flew as metal met metal, the two warriors locked in a desperate, brutal dance. Around them, the Defiant shuddered and groaned, the deck pitching beneath their feet. Sean's crew fought on, engaging the Volari boarders in cramped corridors and smoke-filled chambers. The bark of pulse rifles and the sizzle of disruptor beams filled the air, punctuated by cries of pain and defiance. Sean drove Zinn back, step by step, towards the emergency airlock. The Volari commander fought with the strength of desperation, his movements becoming more erratic, more vicious. But Sean was relentless, implacable, a human juggernaut, fueled by righteous anger. With a final, mighty heave, Sean slammed Zinn into the airlock, the Volari's armor denting under the impact. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around the emergency release lever. He yanked the lever. The airlock doors slammed open, the sudden decompression sucking Zinn and the remaining Volari boarders out into the pitiless void. Their screams were swallowed by the vacuum, their chrome forms vanishing into the starry abyss. Sean sagged against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but there was no time to rest, no time to savor the victory. The Defiant was still in danger, the Volari stealth ship closing in like a predator scenting blood. He pushed himself upright, staggering towards the bridge. "Prescott, status report." "Main power restored," Prescott called back, her fingers flying over the weapons console. "Targeting systems online." "Then let's give our guests a proper welcome," Sean growled. The Defiant's cannons roared to life, spitting streams of superheated plasma towards the approaching stealth ship. The Volari vessel shimmered, its cloaking field struggling to maintain integrity under the onslaught. But Prescott was relentless, her shots precise and devastating. The stealth ship's cloak flickered, then failed entirely, the sleek black hull suddenly exposed, vulnerable. "I've got a lock," Prescott shouted, triumph in her voice. "Fire at will," Sean barked. A barrage of quantum torpedoes leapt from the Defiant's tubes, hurtling towards the exposed stealth ship. The Volari vessel tried to evade, desperately twisting and turning, but it was too late. The torpedoes struck home, burrowing into the black hull before detonating in blinding flashes of light. The stealth ship staggered, flames erupting from gaping wounds in its flank. It listed drunkenly, its engines sputtering, its weapons falling silent. But even as the Volari ship burned, it surged forward, driven by the desperate resolve of its crew. It angled towards the Defiant, its prow a jagged spear aimed at the human frigate's heart. Sean's eyes narrowed. "Not if we ram them first." "You heard me. All ahead full. Let's show them what happens when you corner humanity." The Defiant leapt forward, its own engines howling in protest. The distance between the two ships vanished in heartbeats, the looming hulls filling the view screens. Sean gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles white. Brace for impact. The ships collided with a titanic crash, the sound of rending metal and shattering composites drowning out all else. The Defiant shuddered, sparks cascading from ruptured conduits, the deck bucking beneath the crew's feet. On the view screens, the Volari stealth ship crumpled like a tin can, its hull caving inward, its structure disintegrating. For a moment, it seemed to embrace the Defiant, the two vessels locked in a fatal dance. Then, with a soundless flash, the stealth ship's reactor went critical. A miniature sun bloomed in the void, a blossom of light and heat and radiation. The Defiant reeled, flung away by the shockwave, tumbling end over end. Alarms shrieked, warning lights painting the bridge in hellish hues. Sean clung to his chair, fighting to remain conscious as the G-forces tore at his body. "Damage report," he managed to gasp out. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 9, Prescott reported, her voice strained. "Main power offline, life support failing." Sean forced himself upright, his mind racing. The Defiant was dying, its wounds mortal. There was only one choice, only one path left to take. "All hands, this is the captain," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos raging around him. "Abandon ship, I repeat, abandon ship. Get to the escape pods." He looked around at his crew, at the faces of the men and women who had followed him to hell and back. "It's been an honor serving with you all. Now go. Live to fight another day." One by one they filed out, racing towards the escape pods. Prescott lingered, her eyes locked on Sean's. "Captain—" "Go, Liv," Sean said softly. "They need you now, more than ever." Then she was gone, vanishing into the smoke and the shadows. Sean turned back to the helm, his hands flying over the controls. The Defiant groaned and shuddered around him, the deck shifting beneath his feet. On the view screens, escape pods blossomed from the frigate's flanks, tiny motes of light against the starry backdrop. Sean watched them go, a fierce pride burning in his chest. His crew, his family, safe. That was all that mattered. Sean locked in the course, the Defiant's engines growling in response. The frigate accelerated, angling towards the planet, a battered silver arrow streaking through the void. As the ship plunged into the atmosphere, hull plates glowing cherry red, Sean leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting closed. He thought of all the battles he had fought, all the sacrifices he had made. It had been a good run, a life lived to the fullest. And now it was time for one final act of defiance, one last stand against the darkness. The Defiant, the ship that had carried him through so many trials, would be his funeral pyre, a fitting end for a warrior, for a human. The ground rushed up to meet him, a tapestry of greens and browns and blues. Sean smiled at peace. He had given everything for his crew, for his species, for the cause he believed in. And in the coldness of space the escape pods drifted, carrying the last embers of Sean's legacy. The battle was over, but the war raged on, and as long as even one human drew breath, the fight would continue. For that was the essence of humanity, to strive, to struggle, to defy, to rage against the dying of the light. Sean had shown them the way. Now it was up to them to follow in his footsteps, to carry the torch of human spirit to the stars and beyond. The Defiant was gone, reduced to atoms and embers, but its spirit and the spirit of its captain would endure, a legend, a rallying cry, a promise of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.